Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here. We had crossover day, so the end of session is in sight. And the day before crossover, my property tax plan, Senate Bill 96, got across the finish line. We've heard from supporters from all across the state about that, and frankly, from different factions of the legislature who supported it. It was very encouraging. They saw the value of giving an option to the people of each county rather than a one-size-fits-all statewide solution. In the lead up to that Senate vote, Commissioner Twilliger handed each senator a personalized analysis of my plan, county by county, and the counties, their particular counties of representation. For each senator, it showed how much people of their district would benefit if the proposal were to be enacted. Well, today we're taking it a step further. On my website, governor.sd.gov, we're unveiling a new county map to show South Dakotans how they will benefit. We've got it up on the screen right now. When you click on a particular county, it'll show you what the savings will be. Starting like with Minnehaha County, found an average size valuation for a house of $325,000. So on a $325,000 valuation on a home in Minnehaha County, they would recognize a savings of $927 on that home. If you go to Pennington County, same value of house, $325,000. The Senate Bill 96 would represent an $886 reduction in your homeowner's taxes. Let's take Brown County for another example, $956,000. So every county in the state is included on that map, and we give another tool in the toolbox for the legislators to see what they're looking at as far as an option in their particular county. We hope the legislature takes a long look at this, and we're going into the last couple weeks of session. So I thought session's been going pretty well. Both chambers got through crossover day, still in very good shape, even with the unfortunate activities in the Senate. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Governor, Searchlight had asked Senator Chris Carr about his opinion on what had happened in the Senate earlier this week. He said that the Supreme Court confirming Lieutenant Governor's ability to break a tie vote incentivized gaming, kind of that gamesmanship and those politics. What's your take on that, that belief from Carr?
He told
us that two other branches interfered and have now created an incentive for gamesmanship, referring to the judicial and executive branches. What do you make of that comment?
Well, it's pretty simple. We had a pretty simple understanding of what the Constitution says and what it allows and what it's allowed for over 100 years in our state. And we were just the Lieutenant Governor was just doing his job in that. It was the legislature that raised the question, which we thought was pretty well already answered through 100 years of history. They questioned that, and so we got the opinion from the Supreme Court, who agreed with a unanimous decision. So we weren't meddling. I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous statement, quite frankly.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, please.
Yeah, and the whole situation in the Senate, I've taken the position, and I've said to, I think, some of you, I view my job as being fair, unbiased, and operating the Senate sessions according to the rules and to the Constitution as I understand them. There's a process to challenge my rulings if they if they see fit. Even on a day like crossover day, when there are some unusual motions or some unusual tactics being used by the senators, that's their prerogative. And I'm not gonna stand here and say that they should or shouldn't do that. I'm just gonna try to keep things running according to the rules, whatever is going on in the Senate and whatever they choose to do. I do think it's worth mentioning the idea that the Supreme Court ruling introduced this dynamic doesn't consider the fact that this had been the common understanding of how the tie-breaking power worked and how it has always worked really since statehood. So I don't really see how you can argue that this introduced a change or a new dynamic when it is not a new dynamic. It was the common understanding and how it has been applied all along.
Mr. Van Huysen, just to touch on that, people, like, there have been lawmakers that have been, I guess, what bothers them is because they feel like sometimes you're like picking and choosing whether or not to vote on legislation. And so like that's, I guess, an issue that they take up with when it comes the fact that if they are against a bill and then you decide to vote on it, now you're clearly taking sides.
Yeah, and I would say that I think since I've been lieutenant governor, I think there were 4 ties last year. And this year there have been 5 or 6. And I only voted for a bill on final passage once, and that was the bill that prompted this challenge. And that vote was set aside. And then I voted once for a procedural motion. But in almost every instance, I choose not to vote. And I've always told senators, if they want to come talk to me ahead of time about what I'm thinking on a potential tie, I'm happy to do that. And I have done that when I'm asked. But I really think that this focus on the procedure is really kind of unfortunate when we have things that we need to be resolving here in the last 2 weeks. And I think, this is a story that's probably run its course. I mean, I just think we all need to move on.
Yeah, I would emphasize that last statement because it's really been a distraction we don't need. And quite frankly, kind of belittled some of the important issues that we're here to resolve. I was, as you recall, in ancient history, I was lieutenant governor for 6 years. And I had a number of chances to vote, and I never did. Because if we were neutral on a position or opposed it, there was no reason to vote. And I stayed clear of it. But this isn't rocket surgery. We have a history in our nation. Our federal government runs the same way as the state does for good reason. And it's called checks and balances. And in my time in the legislature and as lieutenant governor, I've seen a few times when the ability of the lieutenant governor to preside over the Senate has paid dividends because of that check and balance.
Governor, on the website you showed, is that conventional to to stand up a website in support of legislation? And can you give me some examples maybe of when you guys or prior administrations have done that in the past?
Prison.
Yeah, I think, good.
Well, we had a whole separate website set up for the prison issue to share all the public information about that during the task force and leading up to the special session. I can remember 10 years ago, the Blue Ribbon Task Force, we had a special website when those bills were up. That was in the Dugard administration, but I don't know, if I sat and thought about it, I can think of a lot of instances of that. It's just about informing the public about what's going on.
That gives you guys an advantage for your bill over maybe competing bills though, does it not?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, with social media, anybody can take advantage of the media platforms to spread their message. But I'm with Tony. I was thinking of bills that I've carried as a legislator where we stood up. Meandered Waters was one of them. show the lakes and whatnot. But many times that they're the same technology is available to legislators as it is to our office. So I never thought twice about that.
Governor, as the rubber meets the road here for this legislative session, could you tell me a little bit about, what your words of wisdom would be to help recenter the caucus and get them focused back on policy as opposed to political questions?
Well, yeah, the advice is just exactly that. There's always, people start getting a little more short-tempered and a little more emotional toward the end of session, and the pressures start building, especially in an election year. And it takes the attention. Jim Putnam, a mentor of ours that we knew well, that chaired appropriation for years, his expression, I've used it often, is keep your eye on the ball. And that's what he used to say all the time. We get into toward the end of session as appropriation of chairs, keep your eye on the ball, focus on policy, try to remove the emotion out of your decision-making process. And I think, I've seen, I think they'll do fine. I'm always kind of the eternal optimist, but they got through crossover, even with some tough situations. They still got through that. We've weathered some kind of emotional debates on both chambers, and they're still moving forward with a balanced budget, and that's going to be our priority, is getting that across the finish line.
Governor, yesterday the Senate approved the SNAP waiver, directing your administration to seek a SNAP waiver regarding soda. You and your staff raised a number of objections to that. And what did you tell House and Senate leadership that didn't sink in? I mean, why did your argument fail?
Yeah. Well, I guess you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink. And I think that kind of sums it up. I think there's a lot of pressure brought to bear in legislators, especially on election year, on issues like this. And you deal with, your issues that you have a distinct philosophy on, but there is always the apprehension of legislators to vote against something like this and how that's going to be used against them in an election year. And so that's part of the issue here. My focus has been on good policy as far as this is a federal program, and the feds have recognized that there's a huge number of states have done this same SNAP waiver, and that's why it makes it even tougher to stand against it when states are doing the waiver. And so I've kind of been an outlier saying, yes, I think that people should make better choices, and don't disagree with any of that. Support the idea of what they're proposing. I'm just saying that's the Fed's job. And have we gotten so used to the dysfunction in DC that we're not going to hold them accountable? That's what really upsets me about this, is they're giving Congress a pass. Because through the big, beautiful bill, they were given the framework on how to address this and set up a task force and fix it at the federal level. A federal program, fix it so we don't have this patchwork of 50 states doing different waivers. And if you've seen some of the information that's provided, it's a nightmare, a ridiculous nightmare of different products that in different states that qualify or don't qualify based on what their perception or how their tax system works and trying to make it workable. That's absolutely ridiculous. The feds should fix it. Congress should get to work and for once, do their job.
Is it safe, like, is it safe to say that that will be your second veto?
No, not safe at all. There's, the bill hasn't got to my desk yet. We'll review it and make a decision. It's like I said, I don't disagree with any of the things that are written into that bill. It's just the fact that, we've caved in. It's almost like we've accepted the dysfunction in DC and the people that are running things in DC to just giving them a pass to try and fix a problem that they created, and then spend state dollars, our tax dollars, basically to supplement a federal problem because the feds are dysfunctional.
Part of that opposition that you've had to that program is that your office has mentioned has been the cost. And particularly, I mean, you mentioned that different states have been using or have been developing systems to identify which products to emit or not. But wouldn't that make it easier for the office, for you all to basically go to a neighboring state like Nebraska, who's identified these products, and then just copy that? Or
Well, it sounds simple, but it's not as simple as that. And maybe, I don't know if Secretary Twilliger would have any additional information, but this is what I do know. Every state on those programs, the tax systems are coded differently. And so it's not as simple as just using another state and model their legislation. And that's part of what's caused different products in different states to be qualify or not, is because of the coding of those products.
I'd add on to that just a little bit. And so when it comes with these waivers and working through the federal government on these waivers, there's requirements where you have to study the health benefits that come along with that. And so the devil's kind of in the details on all of this. It's not as simple as adopting what another state does, because every state has a different process in terms of taxing these goods and X, Y, Z. And so a lot of these waivers are different across the states, we found out. And as we've studied and got more details, you know, some of the contractual work that has to be done to prove if, you know, this waiver is actually adding to the health benefits, that has to be studied as a process of this waiver. So it kind of comes back to what the governor said is, this is a federal program. It kind of needs to be fixed at the federal level, because all these states are supplementing and spending state dollars to administer these waivers, and we just kind of fundamentally disagree with that.
We're gonna go to the phones for a few questions and we'll come back to the room. Okay, we'll come back to the room. Governor, I want to go back to the property tax website. That's showing the average savings for someone on their property taxes. Do you have an estimate of how much more someone might be spending in sales tax then?
No, I don't. I suppose you could extrapolate the number by taking a average of the homes, but we don't have those numbers. And the numbers, we do know that it's not a zero-sum game, because as part of this, obviously, you'd be collecting sales tax from out-of-state visitors, so that we're allowing out-of-staters to subsidize the income that's going back to the homeowners. Sure, Jim?
Thanks for that question. A couple things that I add on to what the governor said is I've kind of looked on that for my personal situation. And so if you kind of figure out how much, the average family, I have 4 at my house, and I've kind of figured it about $160 roughly in additional sales tax over the course of a year. And if you look at the statewide average, each county is a little bit different, but on average, it's about $660 you're saving on the property tax plan. So it's still, for homeowners, it's a, net savings of, approximately $500, give or take, depending on what county you're in. The other thing I'd mention, just add on to the governor, this is a net tax cut to South Dakotans. Tourism is frequently mentioned. It's our second biggest industry, have a lot of visitors. Those visitors, the highest visitation just happens to be in the areas where we're having some of the higher property tax conversations. And so having those folks contribute to this, we think makes a lot of sense. In interviews outside of this room and earlier in the day, I've just been asking about if this may be a continuing conversation. And a lot of people say that it's good to be prepared for the property tax question to not go away after 2026. Looking down the road, what's the game plan if, excuse me, the property tax debate continues on past the 2026 session?
Well, I don't know for certain what the correct answer is to that, because the situation that we're dealing with was the direct result, I think, and I think it's fairly obvious that in aftermath of COVID, there was a huge influx of people coming into South Dakota. And a large number of them ended up in the Black Hills area and in the southeast part of the state, that whole corner. So it artificially drove those, well, not artificially, but it drove the average price of homes in those areas up dramatically. And that's the problem we're at. What I've said from the beginning on these conversations, and part of the reason that I'm supporting the bill that we are, is because of all the statewide solutions to that problem. And for the majority of the state, it hasn't been a problem. You look at the home values in a huge percentage of the state were really unaffected. One of the reasons I've opposed statewide solutions to the problem. And even in the last year or two, as I've talked to realtors in like Rapid City or Sioux Falls, the ship is starting to right itself. Now that that influx has slowed down, the housing market's stabilizing, and that's part of the reason, again, why I'm supporting targeted approach like this, because we're not corrupting the system to fix a 3-county problem or a 5-county problem. We're giving the system a chance to readjust, and unlike some others, I think that our property tax system is pretty sound. We just had some short-term issues to resolve and get past, so I'm looking, I think this situation will get better, especially if we get Senate Bill 96, where they have an option to help mitigate some of those high prices in the short term.
We have time for 2 more questions.
It was mentioned earlier that the conversation around data centers is likely over for this session outside of protections for consumers. So with that kind of being the case, I mean, do you have any thoughts on the way it unfolded and the future of economic development in the state?
Well, yeah, the bills that have been brought forward, I think they've been kind of falling by the wayside. I think the last one to go was that was dealing with the incentives, the RPP. I think that was probably one of the more sound ideas. They're having a lot of difficulty getting anything across the finish line, so we'll see where it all shakes out at the end of session.
Back to the property tax website. Does your office plan, if it gets implemented, does the office plan to track data pertaining to sales tax receipts and estimates on home savings to compare and contrast what you guys estimated and what actually gets implemented?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And how hold this whole concept in Senate Bill 96 with the optional county sales tax. One of the positive things about this idea is that we're not growing government to implement some type of a new system. So this system can be implemented relatively easily within the current system, and so it's modeled exactly after a municipal sales tax system that we have today. And so we'll have reports available, if it's implemented at any county level, that will track the taxable sales, just like the reports that we have with the municipal sales tax, and so we'll be able to track that. The other thing I think is important about the bill itself is the when you get your owner occupied tax statement every year, there'll be a credit on your tax bill that shows how much that sales tax is saving you as a homeowner. And so that's an important piece of it as well. So we'll be tracking all that information at the county level to provide that if it moves forward.
And Governor, just to ask one last question on property taxes, you said that the property tax or the property tax environment in South Dakota is relatively relatively sound. But as I understand, South Dakota is one of the few states that taxes certain construction materials when it comes to building properties. And so I wonder if you mentioned that housing and property prices have risen in recent years. So I'm wondering, is it in addition to sort of the property taxes being an issue, do you see also there being a housing supply issue in those areas that have seen growth in recent years?
Well, certainly that's what caused the rapid increase in their valuations, because there was shortage of housing in those areas. What I'm saying is I think that's stabilizing now from what I've heard, that the supply is starting to catch up with the demand, and those increasing prices have stabilized or starting to stabilize.
Thank you all. Appreciate you being here. If you have unanswered questions, feel free to shoot me a message.
Thank you all.